women's boxing match in history on paper, as well as promotionally, probably, in being Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano. Let's just touch on it. I know this is and new MMA show, but in honor of our boy Tommy O'Neill over at Unboxing, let's just touch on it real quick. Mark, Katie Taylor took the decision, split decision over Amanda Serrano. Let me just, I have the scores right here. Pull up these scores. I believe it is 96-93, 97-93 for Taylor, and 96-94 for Serrano. Watching the fight, what were your thoughts? Do you think the right woman walked away the winner?
Yeah, so as you said, I know we're an MMA podcast, but we got to talk about this fight. Of course, we did have Tommy on last week to preview it, so it feels only right to touch on it now. But even if we hadn't had Tommy on, that event felt so huge. The Garden was absolutely electric. The fight over-delivered. Yeah. I think we'd be here talking about it no matter what. But before I go on, I just want to give a quick shout-out to Tommy from Unboxing. He gave us the Shakur Stevenson lock, Shakur Stevenson by decision, and it hit. So he gave you that one. And though he was torn, he did pick Katie Taylor to win a close fight. So he went 2 for 2 on those.
Perfect,
so props
too.
to him.
That was like perfect.
Yeah. So that was a crazy fight. As I said, round 5 was a classic round that will be on highlight reels for a long time. Same with the final 30 seconds of that fight when they just stood in the middle, Max Holloway style, and threw down. Anyone who doubted those girls' ability to deliver in that huge of a spot was shut up very emphatically. That was incredible. I always love seeing adjustments happen in boxing because it's a sport that only features punching, so it's harder to adjust. Like in MMA, if the striking's not going well, you can say, all right, I'm going to shoot a double. You don't have those kind of options in boxing. So for Katie Taylor to take the beating that she took in round 5, to reset herself and have her best rounds of the entire fight late to close it out was amazing. Now, obviously, I'm an MMA guy. I'm not going to pretend I'm a boxing scoring expert the same way that I am an MMA scoring expert. Well, I'm not going to call myself an expert in either one, but you know what I'm trying to say. But I did actually score that fight a draw. I scored it 95-95, both live and on the rewatch. I didn't change my take on a single round on the rewatch. I thought, I'll say real quick for the sake of it, because I feel like a million people are talking about it. I thought Katie won round 1. I thought she made Amanda miss and used her footwork and landed more cleanly. I thought Serrano just edged round 2. Not a lot happened. I thought Taylor absolutely took 3 by landing the cleaner shots. Serrano was missing again. I liked Serrano's work more in round 4, so I had a 2-2, and that's where the pressure started to turn. Round 5 was obviously incredible. Instant classic round. Both girls bit down. It was rock'em sock'em robots at one point. I thought Katie Taylor was going down 2 different times. Somehow she didn't. But round 5 was Amanda's by a million. But as we know, it's round by round scoring, and without a knockdown in boxing, it's still just 10-9 for Amanda. So that's what it is. I had a 3-2 Amanda at that point. Round 6 was really close. I still gave it to Amanda. Round 7 was Amanda. So I had a 5-2. I thought Taylor stood her ground, came back, edged round 8, and then I thought she really clearly won rounds 9 and 10 to end at 5-5. So to me, it was a draw. I understand Katie winning because some of my closest rounds, like round 2, for example, maybe another one, are ones that I gave to Amanda, so I could see how that went the other way, and it ends up with Katie winning. Some people had the much wider scores for Katie. I don't understand. That was absolutely a close fight, no matter how you slice it. But props to both girls. It was incredible. It absolutely feels like we're going to have to do this one again. They both seemed like they were down to run it back, which was nice to hear from Taylor because there's definitely a world where she could have escaped and been like, oh, on to the next. I got that one done. And she immediately said, I'll do it again. So I'm glad she had that awareness that it is something that everyone feels like she has to do again. But yeah, hopefully we get it again. It sounds like it could be in Ireland, which would be unreal. And I will certainly be watching.
Omar, what were your thoughts in the aftermath of this historic fight? And who did you have on your scorecard?
So after the 5th round, I stopped scoring. It was
Fair enough.
It was pure mayhem. I was watching it with one of my wife's cousins came down from New York, and so we got the family all together, and we ended up watching that boxing fight and the UFC fight all together in the house. So when that fight came on, come to find out, actually, her cousin knows the godfather of Amanda Serrano. They're all from the Bronx.
Oh, wow.
Cool. So there was a little bit more investment in the household than normal. And so after round 5, once she rocked Katie Taylor, all hell broke loose. So I definitely stopped scoring, but I will say that it was an exciting fight. It was probably one of the most exciting boxing fights I've seen in a long time. There's, I don't think that kind of electricity and that kind of excitement happens very often, unfortunately, anymore in the boxing realm, without there being two, crazy marquee fights like a Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder and things like that. But Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano 100% sold out, 100% gave us exactly what we were asking for, what I love from boxing. And it really got to a point, some of those rounds, where they were just kind of like, fuck it. And they just bit down in their mouthpieces and they just threw. And it was great. I want to be very adamant about this point, regardless of who does or doesn't listen. They need to cut the shit with treating women fighters like they're completely different from men fighters. This 2-minute boxing round shit is disgusting. Make it 3 rounds or 3 minutes. Stupid. 10 rounds? Why not 12? There's no actual viable reason for those rules to be different from men. So somebody needs to fix it. Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor proved very much so that they could have gone an extra minute each round and an extra 2 rounds total. So
it's similar to me how in the WNBA and in women's basketball overall, they play with a smaller ball and with a 3-point line that's closer. And I've thought similar things, like why not just play the same game with the same dimensions?
Well, women's hands are smaller, so I get that.
I mean, it's
the same kind of logic. It's instead of equality, it's equity. It's like, because women are smaller, I don't know, whatever you want to say, biologically different from men, we're going to change the rules to have more equity. I'm not saying I agree with it. In fact, I'm with Omar. I would rather it be completely just the same game, the same sport.
I mean, we're getting into a different debate now. I actually think the basketball one makes sense just because it's harder for obviously not all of them, but it's harder in general for them to reach from the men's 3-point line. The hands are smaller in general, so I get that. A time thing has no relation to sex. It's just time. So that I fully agree with Omar. I don't understand that. And think about how much more exciting that fight would have been if we had 10 more minutes of it, or even if it was 2 more rounds. Imagine Katie Taylor having to survive a whole nother minute in round 5.
That's my
everything's
point.
different. And I absolutely agree they need to make that switch.
Yeah, that could have been a knockout. That could have been a very minimum a knockdown with an extra 60 seconds because that girl had her hurt with like a minute and a half into that round, maybe a little bit less than that. She would have had a whole other minute to work this girl, and it would have been a completely different fight.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I hope, women's boxing is not new, but I feel like this fight has the potential to, bring a lot more attention to women's boxing overall. Almost similar to, what Ronda Rousey did for women's MMA. Like there were
agree.
female MMA fighters, but when Ronda Rousey came on the scene, it was like, oh, now there's women's MMA is like on the map, man. So hoping this opens up doors for female boxers all over the place. Very cool.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to say about this incredible boxing match before we dive back into MMA?
The size difference. The size difference between Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor was super obvious if you couldn't tell. Katie Taylor was much thicker and much bigger than Amanda Serrano. Just look at their necks. Look at their necks. They're completely different. And so I don't think enough people are giving Amanda Serrano credit for coming up. I think it was 2 weight classes in order to fight that girl, and borderline almost knocked her out a few times. So much credit to Amanda Serrano for putting up a hell of a fight.
Well, if you are watching this on YouTube, go ahead and drop a comment and let us know who you think won the fight. Do you think Amanda Serrano got robbed? Do you think she was the rightful winner and should have gone home with the gold? Let us know down in the comments. All right, boys, let us jump back into MMA, back